There are two major stories out of the US presidential race today. In one camp, an energized Republican Party is about to welcome Donald Trump to the stage to formally accept the Republican nomination. It'll be the first time we'll hear from him since the attempted assassination. It is a very different mood for the Democrats, with momentum building for Joe Biden to pull out of the race, and reports from US media outlets that could happen within days. We'll have special coverage of Donald Trump's speech later on the news channel. He's due to speak around midday Eastern time here in Australia, and we'll also cross to Jade MacMillan, who is at the Republican National Convention very shortly. But let's start our coverage with News Breakfast co-host Michael Rowland, who is in Washington. Hi there, Michael. Who among the senior Democrats is making their voices heard today?
And that's the interesting thing, Lorna. Good morning. Nobody publicly, but well-sourced stories in outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post have talked about people like former President Barack Obama saying that he believes that Joe Biden doesn't really have a chance of winning in November and should seriously reconsider his viability as a presidential candidate. We have the likes of former Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who still exercises lots of sway in the party. According to the Washington Post, she has told senior Democratic House members that Joe Biden is more than likely to be persuaded to pull out of the race as soon as this weekend. Chuck Schumer, the current Senate leader in the Democrats, saying similar things. So momentum, as you say, seems to be building towards what looks like an inevitable decision by Joe Biden as soon as this weekend to pull out of the race, to see his path to victory pretty much non-existent, and more importantly, the support of powerful Democrats non-existent. No word from the president today. He, of course, is still isolating in his Delaware home after coming down with COVID. But we had released today an excerpt of a radio interview that the president did during his ill-fated swing through the swing state of Nevada over the last couple of days, during which he came down with COVID. This is Univision Radio the president is speaking to, and you'll hear how ropey the president sounds.
I had a terrible night on the debate night. I was exhausted. I had been traveling around the world. I wasn't ready. And I performed terribly. And so people are now saying, well, that was only one thing. But he's 81 years old. What happens when he's 84 years old? What happens, excuse me, when he's 85 years old? I was smart enough to know, with age comes wisdom. I know the difference between the truth and lies. I know the difference between good and bad. I know the difference between what has to be done.
It's really interesting, isn't it, Michael, how the pendulum swings in an election campaign, which I guess began with the debate performance by Biden, and then there was the assassination attempt, and now Biden is sick and can't do these public appearances. It's really swung away from the Democrats.
It has, and that COVID illness has come at the worst possible time, hasn't it, for Joe Biden? He was using the last few days, was hoping to use the next week to rebuild his presidency, to win back that flagging support. It's very hard to do when you're isolating in your lounge room, but it looks as though those efforts will have come to naught anyway. Just a couple of other names in the mix. Al Sharpton, one of the most prominent African-American leaders in this country for many decades, a highly respected figure in the black community, has come out today saying that he believes Joe Biden should consider pulling out. That's important because Joe Biden has also already, for a long time, relied on the support of African Americans to get to the White House and to keep him there. So that's another big blow for the president. And also, I'm going to bring up some quotes of a letter written to the president by a prominent Democratic House member called Jamie Raskin, longtime supporter of Joe Biden, but he has swung away from the president as well. Part of this letter reads, and Jamie Raskin uses appropriately, we're in the US, a baseball analogy. There is no shame, says Jamie Raskin, in taking a well-deserved bow to the overflowing appreciation of the crowd when your arm is tired out, and there is real danger for the team in ignoring the statistics. The letter goes on to say, your situation is tricky because you are both our star pitcher and our manager, but in democracy, as you have shown us more than any prior president, you are not a manager acting all alone. You are the co-manager, along with our great team and our great people. Caucus with the team, Mr. President. Hear them out. You will make the right decision. And that's, Lorna, is the theme we're hearing from every Democrat that goes in front of a microphone today, that while they say, yes, Joe Biden, in their view, has been a great president, they are all confident he will make the right decision. And that, from the party's perspective, appears to be increasingly pulling out of the presidential race, which would be an absolutely momentous move.
Michael, the attention is going to be on the Republicans with Donald Trump speaking there. When do the Democrats gather themselves together? And indeed, what is Kamala Harris up to at the moment?
Kamala Harris, in fact, interestingly enough, was going about her business today, speaking to a rally of Democratic Party supporters. She has been used quite a bit this year. She is a great public speaker. She appeals very much to women and, of course, African Americans. So she is going about her usual vice presidential duties. How this plays out is, it really has to come down to Joe Biden making the decision to pull out. He is by an overwhelming majority, the vastly preferred Democratic nominee. The Democrats have gone through their primary process. He was expected to be rubber stamped as the Democrats' presidential candidate at the party's convention in Chicago next month. There was talk of a virtual roll call before then to speed up that nomination process. But it really comes down to Joe Biden, and he has heard enough advice, apparently, according to these reports, from people he respects, that that decision will be made over the course of the weekend. And then, who knows? Kamala Harris, or whether he calls for an open primary ahead of the convention, that part is unknown. But it looks increasingly likely come November, Joe Biden's name will not be at the top of the Democratic Party's ticket.
All right, Michael, we'll speak again later, but for now, thanks very much. Let's bring in our North America correspondent, Jade MacMillan, who's at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. It's underway there, Jade. We had Steve Daine, a Republican senator, come on a short time ago and said he woke up this morning and thanked God that there would only be 6 more months of Joe Biden as president. They're feeling pretty confident, aren't they?
Yeah, look, things have just kicked off here for the 4th and final day of the Republican National Convention. Anyone who's been tuning into our coverage earlier in the week will know that it can get pretty noisy here at times, so hopefully you can still hear me. But we're expecting to hear from a long list of speakers. They include the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, also the conservative media personality Tucker Carlson, and Donald Trump's son Eric Trump. But really everything over the course of this week so far has been building up to that moment when Donald Trump will take the stage, when he will formally accept his party's nomination, and when we'll hear him speak publicly for the first time since the attempted assassination at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania over the weekend. Donald Trump has given a couple of newspaper interviews. He's posted on social media, and we've seen him here on the convention floor, or in the stands at least, watching on at times throughout the first 3 days of this event. But we haven't heard him speak publicly yet. And he says that he has rewritten his speech in the wake of that shooting, and that he wants to use this address, he says, to try to bring the country together. We've heard from members of his family over the past couple of days, really trying to show a softer side, in their words, of Donald Trump. We heard from his granddaughter last night, who described him as just a normal grandpa. We heard from his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, today, who is also the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. And she suggested that this speech would take a different tone to what we are used to hearing from Donald Trump. Let's see how it ends up playing out. He is scheduled to speak for 90 minutes, so we'll have to wait and see how much it differs from those messages that we are used to hearing from Donald Trump at his campaign events, when he often focuses on his unfounded claims of a stolen election, when he has previously called for retribution against his political enemies and really argued that he has been unfairly targeted. So As I said, everything really building up to that speech. People also here looking out for an expected appearance by Melania Trump, Donald Trump's wife. She did issue a statement in the hours after the shooting, but she's been largely absent from the campaign so far. So her appearance here, something else that people are looking to as this fourth and, as I said, final day gets underway.
Interestingly, Jay, Donald Trump has met with the head of the Secret Service. Kim Cheetle has been criticism of his security detail after that attempted assassination. What do you know of that meeting?
Thank God I have 7 children.
Well, look, there has been enormous pressure on the Secret Service. This is the agency that is tasked with protecting former presidents and also presidential candidates. Of course, Donald Trump is both. There have been so many questions around how this 20-year-old gunman could have been in a position where he could have got onto that rooftop outside of the rally venue in Pennsylvania and fired at the former president. Now, Donald Trump survived, but one man died, Corey Comparator. He is a former fire chief. Officials in Pennsylvania have said that he died trying to protect his family, and there has been a public memorial for him today. That is ahead of a private funeral tomorrow. Now, Donald Trump's campaign spokesman today has called for the director of the Secret Service to resign. There was quite an extraordinary scene here last night at the convention when a number of Republican senators confronted the Secret Service director. They could be heard shouting that Donald Trump demanded answers or deserved answers, and the American people deserved answers. So Kimberly Cheetle has said previously that she will not be leaving her position, but she is also due to give evidence to a congressional inquiry next week.
OK, Jade, thank you very much for that. We will, of course, have continuing coverage on this throughout the day. John Barron and David Spears will join me ahead of Donald Trump's speech in a few hours' time. And then afterwards, we'll have special coverage here on the news channel hosted by Jeremy Fernandez and a panel of experts. So stay with us for all of that. But right now, let's catch up with some other news. And almost 13 million people have had their personal information stolen by cyber criminals who hacked the electronic medical prescription service provider MediSecure. The data haul is one of the nation's biggest cyber breaches to date. National technology reporter Angela Lavoipierre joins us here in the studio. Hi, Ange. So is this more people than we thought or knew about in this hack?
I think everyone was bracing for a big number because, of course, MediSecure was one of only 2 e-scripts providers for all of Australians, so the number was always going to be a bad one. They've gone into voluntary administration now, and their competitor ERX is the only e-scripts provider left. So yeah, 12.9 is incredibly large. It's right up there. I think the only larger one that I can call to mind is the hack of Latitude Financial Services, which was 14 million people last year. So it's brushing the top of that.
What are people being told to do if they're worried that their information has got out?
Well, people don't know whether it is them. The company hasn't been able to identify which individuals were targeted. There's no way of knowing. In fact, they were saying that it was just too expensive an exercise for them, too complex, and they didn't get the government bailout they asked for. So we don't know, and the advice at the moment is take all the precautions that you're asked to, but don't go looking. That's the other interesting piece of advice that's come from the National Cybersecurity Coordinator, Lieutenant General Michelle McGuinness, who says that it could even constitute a criminal offence to go looking, which is unwelcome information. People will be curious, of course, but there's no way to know, unfortunately. And if anything, the advice at the moment is almost assume you have been breached. To behave as if you have, particularly when you look over the last 18 months and see that, between Optus and Medibank and Latitude and now this, that the majority of Australians have been breached, some of them several times over.
Where is this information? What happened to it? Is it being sold?
That's a good question. It was for sale for a shockingly low price by market standards of $50,000, and we don't know if it's been sold. It hasn't been. The trove has not been released publicly. Is important to say. That is perhaps some comfort to people because, of course, there's so much sensitive data in there. What people prescribed, along with all their personal data, phone numbers and home addresses and things like that. So people will be worried, but yeah, it's impossible to know whether it's been sold. In fact, sometimes what happens is a security, as in like the good guys, a security actor will buy back the data. So that may have happened in a best case scenario, but we'll have to sit in the mystery.